Good morning and welcome to CSL Denver, a place, a space, and a face of love. A spiritual community teaching ancient wisdom and applying universal principles to embody the intelligence of the divine and to empower our lives and the lives of others. First and foremost, I want to thank our special musical guest for this month, Robin Hackett. Thank you for that moving song that fits so perfectly, I believe, with today's topic of the force of nature in us. There's certain people who get that, right? Certain people who are in line with that. And so as we start this month of August, our theme for this month is the wonder of nature. The wonder of nature. And today we are going to awaken that force of nature within us and look at what that means and how that relates to us and how we can become more of that. More of that. Now, I'd like to start this morning with a question. Do you believe in God, the living spirit, the all in all? That one indivisible, energetic intelligence that permeates all things. The forces and processes that set the universe into motion. Do you really believe that? Do you believe that we are created in the image and likeness of God? So I'm going to pause there for you to really think about that, because that is the essence of today's talk. That is the essence of life. How do we awaken? How do we live in harmony with that force of nature, that God spirit that is in us all? We say we believe. We say we believe. But if we truly believe, then let us begin to live our lives in that manner. Let us begin to live our lives where these beliefs are reflected in our everyday lives, in our everyday walkings upon the earth. As Robin said in the song, certain people understand that there's a levity that we approach life, and there's a way of looking at things so that we begin to understand the allness of it. The allness of it. So as we look around the world today, it's easy to see one or two things, right? Either we are out of balance with nature or we're just ignoring it altogether. And we're doing that, I would suggest, at great peril. At great peril. Because you see, Ernest Holmes says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And so we have this quote that says this: it is therefore a mathematical necessity that because the originating life principle is infinite, it is a single unit, and consequently, wherever it is at all, the whole of it must be present. The whole of it must be present. So as we look at this quote by Thomas Troward, it really highlights this oneness, this allness, this thing that our ancient ancestors call nature. Now, unfortunately, a lot of historians, I believe, have gotten a misunderstanding of indigenous culture, where it said that they worship nature and of such, right? But what they failed to understand was that they were not worshiping nature. They were in awe of nature. They looked at nature and they realized there were things that animals could do, and there were things that happened in water and in air that was foreign to them. So they thought, right? They understood, though, and they respected that idea of life the way it was, and they began to say, yes, how do I match that? How do I begin to reverence this creative power, this divine intelligence that created all of this? And so what has happened now, I believe, is because we have forgotten that we are a part of nature, that we somehow have gotten a storyline that says we are here to conquer nature. We are here to be overlords of nature. And there's nothing of a sort. We are one with nature. And right now, we are out of tune. I would suggest that if we look very closely at our lives, at our planet, at our atmosphere, at our weather, we would begin to at least admit a little bit that we're out of tune. And so the question ultimately becomes, how do we tune ourselves? How do we become back in our natural state? Now, we understand that there is a hierarchy, but the hierarchy doesn't mean control. It just means the order of things. As we said, we're looking at the allness of God. These forces and processes, we call them principles and laws, that allow us to live life fully, to engage with life at an optimal level. And our indigenous cultures understood that. They understood that there was this way of living, this way of working with nature, not against nature, so that life becomes a dream, like when we row the boat down the stream, right? So now more than ever, we need to see the sacredness in all things, to notice the breathtaking beauty that is all around us, to see the sacred in the trees and in the flowers and in the plants and the stones, as well as within each of us, to weave the soul back together so that we live in everyday oneness, Because if you don't think that's a thing that we need to do, just take a moment to think about, or even during this week, go out in nature and you will begin to notice how being in nature has a calming effect on us. Now, it's different for everybody, right? Some people like to be in the woods. Some people like to be near water. Some people like to play in the dirt, or some people like animals, or a whole myriad of things, that when we become engrossed in those things of nature, as they are called, we begin to feel a different way. We begin to see life a different way. And we awaken to that nature that's inside of us. Now, you just think about a lot of the seasons, or a lot of the holidays and ceremonies, the equinox and the solstices and a lot of the holidays that we celebrate across all the religions and all the traditions have something to do either with nature or that are indicated by some natural phenomenon. And so when we begin to look at that and understand that, we begin to see how we fall in line, right? We begin to see the beauty in nature, the magic in nature, that there is a divine wisdom in all things. And so that reminds us, it awakens within, I hope, that there is a force of nature within each and every one of us, waiting to be in tune, waiting to find its alignment, so that we begin to project and live and be an example of what it means to be in tune with nature, what it means to be ultimately in tune with God. And so when we're able to do that, we can move forward into this idea that's so appropriate. Ernest Holmes says this in this thing called You: I am guided by the same intelligence and inspired by the same imagination which scatters the moonbeams across the waves and holds the forces of nature in its grasp. This idea that we are made from the same stuff, the same intelligence, the same imagination that is in everything. We look at how we enact life in moments of need, in moments of fear, in moments of joy. And that same essence is there to awaken us, to enliven us, to move us forward. So when we begin to understand that, the question becomes, that same spirit that guides nature, the flowers know when to bloom, right? The birds know when to sing. If you really want to understand the essence of the oneness of nature, wake up one morning around dawn, just before the sun rises, maybe 15 minutes before the sun rises, and go sit outside. You will begin to hear a symphony of nature. The birds are awakening, and the animals are beginning to scurry around, and you can feel a presence there. You can feel an energetic connection that allows you to say, wow, I feel that. So the question that I ask myself when I do that, and I invite you to do the same, are we listening? Are we looking? Are we observing the different things that we want, right? That same intelligence is what's guiding us right now. And so we have this basic truth, this foundational truth that says there is a life-giving animated source that is omnipresent and that can be drawn upon directly because it's within us. There's guidance there, there's support there in all of it. And it's calling us to live a higher expression of life, a higher expression of ourselves. And so as we begin to get in tune with this natural phenomenon within ourselves, and we begin to find this nature that we can connect to with all things, there are three things I want to leave us with today that we can begin to contemplate, that we begin to try to activate in our lives every day in some small way, so that we begin to awaken to a new way of living. We begin to awaken to the things around us that are changing. We look at the weather patterns just this last week of the rain and the fires. We know there's an imbalance. And so when we can find these truths, I think we'll be able to begin to make a change, begin to live more in harmony with everything around us. Now, the first thing is, this first spiritual truth is, we must regain our balance and alignment. We must regain our balance and alignment. That means we have to do as Stephen Harper says here, that is essence. Our relationship with nature is more one of being than having. We are nature. We do not have nature. We are nature. We do not have nature. We are part of God's creation. We are part of all there is. And so when we begin to find that balance and alignment between understanding that, then we begin to believe in the incarnated spirit that is within the human being. And we know that one is indivisible. From our basic math class, you can't divide one thing. You start going into sub numbers, and now we're into a whole nother realm of existence. But if we're looking at wholeness, we're looking at oneness, one is indivisible, except by itself. It's the only number. So when we begin to believe in that incarnated spirit in us, in all of nature, we can begin to awaken to that force. We can begin to attune to that force. And just like when we look at iceberg in the water, right? We see the tip of it, but there's so much more underneath And in fact, it is just a different expression of the water that it finds itself in. It is the same thing, just expressing differently. So when we begin to understand that, when we begin to understand that we are individual icebergs floating in the spirit of life, and that each one of us has so much more essence in the spirit than we allow often to be expressed. And so now we begin to open up to this force within, this nature within, and attune it with everything. And find that oneness and find that connection and know that we are made of the same stuff. And when we do, balance and alignment is just a natural byproduct. We begin to understand that if it's cold enough, we will become an iceberg. And as it warms, we will float back into the water. And we have this cycle of life, this ebb and flow that is present everywhere in nature. Everywhere in nature, including us. So the first thing we must do, we must find and realign the balance within ourselves and with nature. Because as Stephen said, we are nature. We're not something else. We are part of nature. That is us. And then once we've understood that and we've grappled with that and we've come to terms with that, and that takes some practice sometimes, because a lot of us have to humble ourselves. We have to admit certain things that we've learned or whatever are not whole truths, but half truths. When we do that, we wake up to the second spiritual truth, is that we have to be comfortable with growth and change. There's no way around it. We have to be comfortable with growth and change. When we look around us, everything in our lives is changing every moment of the day. That is the nature of nature, if you will, right? It is an ever unfolding, evolving, expanding presence. So no matter where we are or where we go, we can't afford change in our body, in our environment, in our relationships. But when we can find the balance and alignment with the one thing, the all in all, then we can begin to grow with grace, grow with expectation, grow with excitement of what's coming next, not looking behind and being fearful or being out of tune with where we are now. We understand that what is past has brought us to this moment. So now let us grow upon that. Let us change to adapt to what we're doing in life right now. And if we forget, our environment is showing us day by day that things are changing, which means we have to change. We have to change our relationship and our understanding of all of nature. And so when we understand that everything is changing and growing, and we understand then that we have to be open to the oneness. We have to be open to the different ways and expressions of life that may not be comfortable, that may not make us feel happy all the time. But if we are listening and we are observing, we understand the right thing to do. And we do it, whether it's comfortable or not, whether we understand it 100% or not. And when we can do that, now we're moving in light speed. John Maxwell says this: change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. Meaning, we can stay stuck in a moment or in a time or in a place where we don't understand, where we don't realize and buy into the idea that we are part of all. All is us and us is all, right? And we can grow with that if we want to, or we can stay stuck. And we know people that are stuck, right? We know people that are stuck in moments in time, periods in their lives, ideas about the world that are not helpful, that are not working, that are not supporting that individual or that community, to be present in the moment called now. Present in the moment called now. And so when we begin to understand that we are going to change and we got to grow with it, then we set up the final point, right? We understand that we have to find balance and alignment. We understand that we have to be comfortable with growth and change. And then the last thing, the last spiritual truth that we must grab hold to with both hands is that we have to embrace all of life. We have to embrace it all. There is no good. There is no bad. There is just life. And within life, there are different aspects of it that we feel comfortable with and others that we don't. However, to have the experience called life, they go hand in hand. As you know, up has absolutely no meaning if there's no down. They go together. They are a relationship of oneness. And so when we begin to see that in everything, then we can begin to put ourselves in a position where we accept everything. And that means everything. And then we have to begin to use our intelligence, this divine spirit that within, this imagination, this perspective, this insight, this intuition that is infused in all things to guide us. Not judge it, not condemn it. I mean, we can do that, but that oftentimes just anchor us more into the stuff that we don't like anyway. So how do we find this new approach of life? How do we find this new way of living that helps us move easily and effortlessly? Because when we can do that, I think this statement by Iyanla Vanzant really begins to set the point. Just for the day, if we can do this just for the day, to allow ourselves or to allow yourself to embrace all that you are every moment. Know that you are a vessel of light. Allow yourself to release all doubts about your abilities. The mistakes of the past and the fear of the future. Because when we can do that, it's like the story in the Bible by Jesus, Matthew, in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 23:6, that says, look at the lilies of the field. They don't toil, they don't strive, because they understand the nature of all things. They understand how to embrace life, how to embrace God, and how to allow everything to unfold, because there is a nature within it that allows this to be so, that allows this to be. And so as we have that phrase, or several phrases, you got to get in the flow and stay in the flow and go with the flow. That flow is nature itself. And when we are allowed to put ourselves in there, and we are allowed to release the fear and all of the things that sometimes hold us in a place where we really know we don't want to be, we just have to change our mind. We just have to change our view and allow the natural nature that is in us, which is God, the Spirit itself, to unfold. And so with that, I think, as we look forward to this week, and we step into the call to action this week to anchor these ideas in our lives and anchor these points, I have two things. The first, this week, take time in nature and begin to tune in and find your balance. Tune in and find your balance. And then find one thing you can commit to that will have a positive effect on our planet. That will have a positive effect. So go out in nature, find your tuning, and then figure out what we can do, what you can do to sustain life in a normal, natural oneness. And when we do that, we would step into the affirmation of this week, which is, I am one with all life on planet Earth. I am one with all life on planet Earth. And so as we just allow that to sink in and to enrich in our lives, let's take a deep breath and go into prayer. And so, as we observe the allness of spirit that is everywhere present, that divine intelligence, that nature, that nurturing aspect of spirit that enriches our lives and the lives of others and this planet and the entire universe, we begin to see that there is no place where God is not, and there is nothing that is outside of the preview of the divine. And so no matter what we're going through, no matter what we may have forgotten, no matter what we think we might be, let us allow the spirit, that natural nature of God essence, of power and presence, to come alive within each one of us, to awaken us to a way of living that is easily and effortlessly. Not because there are not ups and downs, not because there's not things that we don't necessarily vibrate with, but because we understand the flow of life and we know that God is in control. And not in control in a forcing way, because we know we have choice, but in a controlling way of allowing the laws and the principles of the universe to support us in everything we do. And so right here, right now, I declare and know that each and every one of us are listening to that idea of God within, listening to that way of activating our lives so that we begin to be more than we ever thought we could be, and in tune with the infinite. And so it's because of that attunement that I give thanks, knowing that I can pick up any frequency, any channel that is necessary at any moment in time to be a divine expression of God. And so I'm thankful for that, for all of us. And so it is in that thanksgiving, in that understanding, in that presence of God itself, that I release this prayer, knowing that it has already been activated in the allness that there is no separation between our words, your thoughts, our imagination of what life is and could be. And so I let go, I release, and I know that this is so, and so it is. Amen, amen, and amen.